so that we could be able to recognize you and to see your beautiful and handsome faces. Mute your microphone to avoid interruptions or disturbance during our program. Please change your name, with the format given to you, department, or which industry you came from, underscore your full name, underscore if you are a student, faculty, or visitor. If you have questions later on in our open forum, do not hesitate to use the raise hand icon or chat your questions in our public chat box. Always try to use the different reaction icons found below your screen. So without any further ado, to formally start our program, let us have first the opening prayer to be followed by the singing of the Philippine National Anthem, Tayo ay Dabawenyo, and JMCFI.
Let us all feel the presence of our Lord. Almighty God, our Father, we praise and thank you for this day. We come to you this hour asking for your blessing and help us as we are gathered together virtually. We pray for guidance in the matters at hand and ask that you would clearly show us how to conduct our work with a spirit of joy and enthusiasm. Give us a desire to find ways to excel in our work. Help us to work together and encourage each other to excellence. We ask that we would challenge each other to reach higher and farther to the best we can be. We ask this in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. Let us
Bayang magiging dalas ng silanganan, alam ng puso, sa dibdib mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, duyan ka ng mag-ibig, sa manlulupig, di ka pasisiin, sa dagat at bundok, sa simoy at sa langit mong bukhang, manhirap ang tula at awit sa pagnayang minamahal, ang kislap ng watawat punta-kumpay na nagnilalim, ang bituin at araw niya kailan, pag may di magdidilim, lupa ng araw ng buwan, at ipagsinta, buhay langit sa piling mo. Aming bigaya ng may mga-api, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Coming together is a beginning. Keeping together is progress. Working together is success. Good morning and welcome to our Students' Research Congress with the theme Phenomenal Milestone, Forecasting Prospects and Innovations through Research and Development. The Research Council prepared this two-day Congress today and on May 4th. This is to enhance the needs and knowledge of the students, faculty, and our visitors about the research and to present their exemplary outputs that could be helpful for each of us. I would like to inform everyone, to those who cannot able or doesn't able to enter our Zoom link this morning, we are also live in our Facebook page. Okay, so we would like to acknowledge our administrators who supported us to make this event possible. To the school officials, school president, Dr. Felix Chavez Jr., school administrator, Ma'am Rosemary N. Magnao, Vice President for Academic Affairs, Dr. Marietta A. Nunez, Vice President for Administration and Finance, Ma'am Maria Merfeli L. Marimon, Vice President for Human Resource Management and Development, Ma'am Mirna L. Ambrosio, Vice President for Research Development and Quality Assurance, Dr. Josefina D. Ortega, Vice President for Community Extension and Alumni Affairs, Mr. Genesis O. Silata, OIC Vice President for Communications and External Affairs, Mr. Jacinto Dandan III. To our dear Deans of College, we have College of Arts and Science Education, Mr. Mark Limanya, College of Criminal Justice Education, Dr. Ricardo Garcia, College of Information Technology Education, Mr. Aaron Vergara, College of Business Education, Dr. Melchor Bumbeo, College of Engineering Education, Engineer Roldan Suazo, College of Teacher Education, Dr. Cecil Ocampo, College of Allied Health Sciences Education, Ma'am Maria Bea Lau, College of Medicine, Dr. Nestor Arce, and of course, our organizer and sponsor for this event, the members of the Research Council. Again, good morning, everyone. And please turn on your cameras if you have a good internet connection so that we could be able to see your beautiful and handsome faces. And please wave your hands or click the virtual clock as I mentioned your department. Let us see whose department is active this morning. Okay, so students, teachers, and our visitors. So let's go first with the College of Allied Health Sciences Education. Who are here? You can use the virtual clap or wave your hand if naka-on yung camera. We also have our students and teachers who are watching us live in the Facebook page. How about the College of Medicine? Meron ako nakita dito mga form siguro dito sa Zoom. Okay? And of course, we have the College of Criminal Justice Education. Saan yung atin? Oh, nandito din si Doc Garcia. Naka-on ng camera. Diba? Very active. We also have the College of Engineering Education. Oh, meron tayong mga students here. You can also use your, meron mga nag-virtual club. Okay. We also have from the College of Business Education. Sana ang COVID natin. Active din itong COVID. Thank you. We also have the College of Arts and Science Education. We have the Psychology and the Social Work. Yun, nag-wave sila. Mga active natin ng mga students na naka-on cam. Thank you so much. We also have the College of Information Technology. Yun, nag-virtual class. Thank you. We also have the College of Teacher Education. Ako na lang mag-virtual clap for CTE. Ayun, marami palang CTE. Okay. Thank you. And we would like to acknowledge our visitors. We have our visitors who are here this morning. We have from the Regional Ethics Monitoring Board of Region 11. Where are our visitors? Can you wave your hands? Yun. And of course, we have our speaker. Yun, naka-wave ang ating speaker. And of course, we have from SPMC, Southern Philippines Medical Center. Welcome po to our Students Research Congress. So thank you so much for being with us, especially doon sa nanonood ng Facebook Live. So without any further ado, let me call on our dear school president, Dr. Felix C. Chavez Jr. to give us the opening remarks.
I'm very happy to welcome you to another research conference organized by the Research and Publication Office of this institution. I thank the Research Department led by Dr. Joe Ortega and to the research directors, Professor Ronnie Mendoza and Professor Marshall Joy Inilo, and the Research Council members for establishing the research culture of our institution. I also thank Dr. Alvin Concha for accepting our invitation as plenary speaker despite of your very busy schedule. I used to work with Dr. Alvin most of the time when there are applications for ethics accreditation among research institutions in Region 11. As we engage in this plenary discussion on research ethics, I'd like us to consider how we can use what we've learned to better protect research participants. Indeed, we cannot slow the momentum we have created within our organization when it comes to research outputs. Yet, we need to also consider the importance of following our ethical guidelines. Moreover, I wish to congratulate the paper presenters and the participants of this event. I recognize that you have taken time and allow yourself to learn new things, and for this, I wish to commend all of you. Let me conclude by saying that I hope this conference will bring new insights to our research endeavors. As usual, I am sure that we will use this conference to share and exchange our research experiences. I want to wish you all a very fruitful day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doc. We would like to inform everyone that we will also be giving prizes and awards at the end of our research congress. So you have to stay tuned with us. Especially, we will have our raffle draw. So you will not know when will be our raffle draw. So you have to stay with us. Of course, magbibigay kami ng mga prizes. The Research Council has prepared a prize for all of you. So before we officially introduce our plenary speaker for this morning, again, let me remind to please turn on your camera if you have a good internet connection. So, and of course, mute your microphones to avoid interruptions or any disturbance while our speaker is speaking. At this point, Ma'am Rachel Joy Inilo, our Director for Health Research, will introduce our dearest plenary speaker for this morning. A virtual clap, please. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce our speaker today. Our speaker is a graduate with a Bachelor of Science degree, major in biology at Ateneo de Davao University. He obtained his medical education from Davao Medical School Foundation and his family and community medicine training from the University of the Philippines, Philippine General Hospital. He holds a master's degree in research, major in gender studies. He was a recipient of a GIZ fellowship grant for international health financing and health insurance. He presently works in Southern Philippines Medical Center as the head of the Research Publication Office. He is the editor-in-chief of the SPMC Journal of Health Care Service. He is also the chair of the Regional Ethics Monitoring Board of the Department of Science and Technology, Region 11. He teaches medical anthropology, gender, sexuality, family and community medicine, research ethics, and epidemiology to medical and graduate students in Davao Medical School Foundation. He has worked on the areas of women's health, gender identities discourse, and family and community medicine. Among his publications are the book's initiatives to engage men and boys for the achievement of gender equality, the vignettes from the villages of Asia and Africa 2011, and the research book 2006. His works can also be found in The Future of Asian Feminisms, Confronting Fundamentalisms, Conflict, and Neoliberalism 2012. Globalization, Technology Diffusion, and Gender Disparity 2012. Ethnographic Discourse of the Other, the Conceptual and Methodological Issues 2008. And Women's Sexual and Reproductive Health, Equity, Access, and Quality in Family Practice 2003. He presently lives in Davao City in southern Philippines with his wife, Lynn, and his two sons, River and Rainleaf. He has special interest on medical anthropology, gender, sexuality and reproductive health, human resources for health, family and community medicine, counseling and family practice, evidence-based medicine, healthcare and clinical research, qualitative and quantitative research, medical informatics, and primary healthcare. Without further ado, please help me welcome our speaker, Dr. Alvin S. Concha. Good morning, Doc.
Hello, good morning. Let me share my screen. Okay, please let me know if you see that and if you can hear me clearly.
Yes po, Doc.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Dr. Felix, President of JMC, Vice President, Dr. Joe Ortega, Mamayet, Munez. I used to work in JMC, no? So I know many of the personalities in JMC, deans, faculty, students, research directors, and please extend my greetings also to Pastor Kibuloy. I am very honored and happy to be here again. Um, and I am doubly honored to be speaking in front of you on research ethics in your Congress, in your student research Congress. Um, so I was given by Ma'am Jo Ortega roughly 1.5 hours to take the plenary session for research ethics. I will probably not use everything in that slot. This will probably be short, but I would like to divide this session into two. Maybe we can have a 2 minute, 5 minute break, probably in the middle of the session. I hope that's okay with you. So let's get it going. I will be talking about research ethics. This is an introduction to research ethics. Okay. So just a little about this introduction to research ethics. The contents of this lecture was based on the lectures of the Philippine Health Research Ethics Board, defining research ethics principles and preparing an adequate and appropriate informed consent process and form. So this is not intended to replace the FREB, SIDTA basic research ethics training. That training is a 2-day workshop training designed to capacitate the learners to conduct ethical research and or participate in the research ethics review system. This is just an introduction, very short course, just to give you a very brief background on research ethics. Our objectives for this session would be the following. So by the end of this two-part lecture, you shall be able to explain the benefits and harms involved in research, explain why research ethics is important, explain the principles of beneficence, non-maleficence, respect, and justice as practiced in research, enumerate the most common international and national ethical guidelines for doing research involving humans, and describe the ethics review process and the functions of a research ethics committee. That's quite a lot, I know, but like I said, this will just be a very brief introduction. So at the end or nearly the end of this session, we will be able to answer more or less what does it mean to do research ethically. We've always been told about this now by our teachers. Always be ethical in your research. Do your research ethically. What does it mean to do research ethically? So we will. That's the question that we are going to explore in this next few minutes. Like I said, this will be a two-part lecture. I insist on a break in the middle. Usually it works for the many audiences that I have spoken to. Usually it works to have a break in the middle, but we will divide the session into two parts. The first part will consist of talking about the benefits of research, then the harms in research, the known harms and the lesser known harms in research, and then we'll explore a little about research as an act, or the activities when doing research, the action and the ethics of research. Then after the little break, we will have part two, in which we will tackle ethical principles, beneficence, non-maleficence, respect, and justice. Then we will have a very brief overview of ethical guidelines, and then very brief also research ethics committees, its functions, overview of review process, and probably we will end in a question and answer forum, and I will be happy to answer your questions later on. I missed introducing where I come from. By the way, I'd like to elaborate also. It was mentioned in the introduction. I come from the Regional Ethics Monitoring Board of Region 11, REMB, no? And the REMB 11 is the regional arm of the Philippine Health Research Ethics Board. We monitor research ethics committees here in the region and in other nearby regions. And we provide technical assistance to the ethics committees as they operate. Uh, and we facilitate the accreditation of the research ethics committees um, by the Philippine Health Research Ethics Board. Okay, so that's where I'm coming from. Okay, maybe we can start with part one. Okay, so we do research because we want to answer questions and contribute to generalizable knowledge. I think this is the first thing that your research faculty, research teacher tells you. No, we research because we want to produce knowledge. And this knowledge, they are theories, they are principles, they are associations. You know, there is a significant association. There is this principle which emerged from the research. These are the emerging themes. These are the theories that emerge from the research. These are the knowledge that we produce when we do research. No? And why do we produce knowledge? Simply because we are an evolving society. We don't just rely on the knowledge that has been given to us. We continually produce it in order to improve the way we live, the way we act on a day-to-day basis, the way we interact with people, the way we perform our responsibilities, the way we do our work. We want to improve it. That is why we want to gain more knowledge in order to translate this knowledge into action. And we know that we are only able to translate this knowledge into action if we have been very meticulous in asking the questions and answers behind this knowledge. And why do we want to continually improve? Because we know that our actions can ultimately lead to development. In the end, we ask questions, we answer these questions, we produce knowledge because we want to improve the way that we live. That's the essence of this slide. Okay, so the thing with producing knowledge is it involves harm. We just don't simply ask questions and answer them and pretend that we are not harming others. This may not be very clear to you right now, no? So I'll point out some examples in the next few slides. Okay, so the next few slides will be a little sample of research in history, and we'll for these particular examples, we will look at the mishaps of research. Technically, how not to do research 101. Let's look at about 5 or 6 studies that have been done before and how they went south, and let's try to learn from them, and hopefully they can elucidate the principles that we will be pointing out later on. So there was this research before 1932 to 1972. This ran for 40 years. It's called the Tuskegee syphilis study. It started with a very good question. It's a simple question. It's a very good question to ask also, and it's a very good question to know the answer of. What is the clinical course of untreated syphilis? We know syphilis. It's the sexually transmitted disease. No, so in this research, there were 600 black men, 399 with syphilis, and 201 who did not have the disease. They were enrolled in this study. This took place in Macon County, Alabama, in the U.S. The thing with their participation was there was no informed consent. They were not informed that they are in this study, and their consent was not taken in order to participate in this study. So the participants were told that they were being treated for bad blood. That that very general idea, no, that very general diagnosis. You have bad blood, and you are being treated for bad blood. But that was syphilis. Actually, later on, they would know that they had syphilis all along. No treatment for syphilis was given to them. Available sometime late 1930s, and right away it was determined. It was pointed out as the drug that could treat syphilis. But even when the drug came out, the participants were not given any treatment, and they were just given free medical exams, free meals, and if they died, because syphilis can result in that. But the very late stages of syphilis is very very painful, no? Because it involves the nerves. So if they died during the study, they were given burial assistance. Their families were given burial assistance. So it was originally projected to last for 6 months, but the study actually went on for 40 years. Just because they want to know what is the clinical course of untreated syphilis. The length itself, the protraction of the protracted duration of the research itself is enough to warrant the stopping of the research right away, no? But they didn't stop this even when penicillin came out, even when some publicity came out that they should have stopped, and they should have not allowed the men, the participants to have to go on with the disease untreated. And it took 1972 to 1997. That's almost 30 years. That's 20 plus years. It took 20 plus years for the United States to recognize that this was a mistake on the part of the United States Health Service. No? And during his term, U.S. President Bill Clinton apologized. That was in 1997. Apologized to the families and to the surviving patients, participants of this study for the wrong thing that they have done. This was in the context of research. Okay, and this example, we know this example. We have read about the Nazi experiments in the 1940s. No? They involved Romani, ethnic Poles, Soviet prisoners of war, disabled Germans, and Jews. They participated without consent. They were forced to participate in research, and some the Germans on them. So these are the examples of the researches that they participated in. Injection of the into the eyes to see whether it would change eye color. Imagine that. So what's behind it? The question was, would the eye change color if I inject a dye into it? Would it change into blue if I inject dye into it? Would it change into green if I inject dye into it? That question, um, and carried out in order to know the answer of that question, and therefore uh, implemented as a research. Sewing twins together in attempts to create conjoined twins. Imagine, um, we have conjoined twins. We know conjoined twins, but this one is the reverse. They are not conjoined twins, and they were sewed together in order to recreate something that came out uh, naturally as conjoined twins. Removal of sections of bones, muscles, and nerves without anesthesia. Imagine. Bacteria injections to the bone marrow to determine effectiveness of new drugs. Or various poisons were secretly administered to experimental subjects in their food. The victims died as a result of the poison or were killed immediately in order to permit autopsies. So this was in the 1940s. Sometime later, I'm sure you've heard of this. There are I've seen like I've seen a Netflix series that also had this experiment. It wasn't um, specifically Milgram, but in this experiment, the author Milgram started asking the question: to what extent do humans obey authority? The social question. It's a social science question. To what extent do humans obey authority? And the participants are the subjects here. I hope you will see. Okay, the I don't know if I'm sorry. Okay, the participants or the subjects, the one below, were told by the experimenters, the one on the right upper quadrant. The experimenters were actors to administer increasing electric shocks. So 15, 375 nurse, the one on the left, no? Every time learners made a mistake in answering questions. So the experimenter and the subject were actors. Only the experimenter and the fake test subject, the one on the left, were actors. Only the subject who administers shock um, were the research participants. But the shock was fake also. So every time that the subject seems to administer the shock, the fake subject on the left would act out that it has received the shock. But the subject is being told by the experimenter, who's also an actor, that every time that the fake test subject will make a mistake, the subject should administer the shock. All participants, all subjects who administered shocks continued up to 300 volts. So imagine experimenter saying, okay, electrify, okay, administer the shock, increase the shock to 375 volts. All participants continued to 300 volts. And 65% continued to 450 volts. And this was very telling about the answer to the question, to what extent do humans obey authority? But imagine how the participants processed that at the end of of the study. Imagine how they thought all along that they have done harm to others just because they're obeying authority. Okay. There's also this study in the 70s. We call this the tea room trade. The original question was, how do men behave with other men in public toilets? That's that was the question. It was a social research again. And Lord Humphreys pretended to be a lookout for men who had oral sex in public restrooms. So it was a community wherein public restrooms were parang identified to be meeting places of men who had oral sex with other men. And the researcher, Lord Humphreys, pretended to be a lookout for the men who had oral sex in public restrooms, just so he could observe what they were doing. And then he would say, okay, if somebody is coming, I'll just give you a signal so that you can stop whatever you're doing. But otherwise, I'll be here. I'll be your lookout. You can do whatever you want inside. Then Humphreys copied the car plate numbers of the manuscripts after he published Tea Room Trade in Personal Sex in Public Places. Imagine the deception that the researcher, layers of deception that the researcher had to do in order the answer to the question on how do men behave with other men in public toilets. We call this the Habasupai genetic study. The original question was no, this was not the original question. The original, yeah, this was the original question. The original question was, do Habasupai tribe members? Habasupai is an indigenous people community in Colorado, I think, in Arizona, I think. Yeah. Do Havasupai tribe members have the gene variant linked to diabetes? What happened was the members of the leaders of the Havasupai tribe commissioned a researcher in Arizona State University to do a study because diabetes was very common among their people. No? So the participants donated blood for a diabetes genetic study. And then without the participants' permission, the same blood sample. So the study was done. The study was finished. And it concluded by saying that there was no link. There was no gene among the Havasupai tribe members to link it to diabetes. But without the participants' permission, the same blood samples were used for other studies. This was much later. Now, this was years later. The blood samples have been stored in a refrigerator, and somebody else was asking another question, was asking another research question. Somebody else saw the blood and said, I'd like to do studies on mental illness, inbreeding, and I'd like to have some theories of the tribe's geographical origins. So may I have the blood? And the original researcher gave the blood to the second researcher. And the second researcher came up with conclusions, came up with findings, and presented this to the thesis committee, I guess, thesis committee, in which one of the tribe members happened to attend. And so when the presentation was almost over, the tribe member asked how the samples were taken. And so it came to be that the samples um, were redonated to another researcher to answer another question, to which the members of the Havasupai tribe did not consent. Okay? So the Arizona State University spent millions in fighting lawsuits and paid uh, almost 1 million to 41 tribe members who participated in the study and returned the blood samples and provided other forms of assistance to the tribe because they made a mistake, because they allowed the second study to be done without the consent of um, the 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 damage to the tribe were very devastating. No? Imagine being told that instead of the 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 tribes, it is the tribes' belief that they have a creator um, that put them in the canyons, in the Grand Canyons, in order to protect the Grand Canyons. That was their belief. But this study said that no, the tribe did not come from the Grand Canyon itself. It came from Asia, and then with the land bridges. That's how we were told. Also, the land bridges traveled to the United States, and then some of them settled here in the Grand Canyons. But imagine being told that your belief all along, the beliefs of the generations before you all along were wrong. Culture of the that has harmed the cultural devastation to the participants, actually to the participants of research. And in this case, it wasn't even the original question that produced harm. It was a question raised by another one. Okay, and this last example, fairly recent. It was in 1998, but the results of this was fairly was discovered fairly recent. No? The question was, is MMR, measles, mumps, rubella? That's a vaccine. No, is MMR, measles, mumps, rubella vaccine associated with autism? So this was a question tackled by Dr. Wakefield. No? What happened was Andrew Wakefield and 12 of his colleagues published a case series of 12 patients suggesting the association of MMR vaccine with autism. Suggesting, okay, but it was published in the Lancet in 1998. But right after that, many clinicians, epidemiologists questioned the results of the suggestion. And later on, the epidemiological studies refuted the findings. The studies, the subsequent study said no, MMR is not associated with autism. And these are larger studies, larger than 12 participants. They drew their conclusions from 12 participants originally, but when larger studies were done, it was proven to be wrong. The conclusions were proven to be wrong. The Lancet made a retraction of an interpretation in 2004. So that was, 6 years after Lancet said, okay, because of the findings, the original study probably misinterpreted, the authors probably misinterpreted the findings in the original study. That was in 2004. And along with that, the Lancet also produced a statement about the financial interests of Wakefield, of Dr. Wakefield. Turns out, Dr. Andrew Wakefield was a connected with some association against vaccines in general, against MMR vaccines. So and Dr. Wakefield did not disclose this when when he published the article. So special interests of Dr. Wakefield was released in 2004. Um, but because of the increasing findings that proved that the original findings were wrong, in 2010, so that was 12 years after, the original paper was retracted. What happened along? There was an MMR scare. So there was a vaccine scare while this was ongoing, within the 12 years that this was ongoing, and even after the 12 years, people were scared to take MMR, and vaccination rates dropped, and there were even outbreaks in the UK and elsewhere in the world that were linked to the scare, because people don't want to be vaccinated against measles, mumps, rubella anymore. So there was damaged public trust in science, and people got sick, and measles, mumps, and rubella in children would produce very high mortality and morbidity. In the end, Dr. Wakefield and Dr. Walker Smith, one of the colleagues, were barred from practicing medicine in the UK. There, so those were a few examples lang of researches gone wrong, no? To elucidate my point that knowledge production involves harm, that asking a question and looking for answers to the question involves harm, not only to participants, but can also involve harm to the public. It can cause people to suffer, or it can cause people to die even, when you ask a question and when you attempt to answer it. There are also other very good examples of this, very dramatic examples of this. You can also read the following researches: the Walter Reed, particularly Walter Reed yellow fever experiment, the Willowbrook hepatitis study, and the Stanford prison experiment. My point here is, in research planning and reviews prior to the conduct of the research, in research planning and reviews prior to the conduct of research, the risk of harm is assessed. It's when research is reviewed by the research ethics committee, or probably by your technical panel, harm may not be obvious right away from that point, but the risk of harm is assessed. And so all throughout this lecture, and probably all throughout your pre-research preparations, you will probably be hearing about the risk of harm that your proposed study can do to potential participants. So the point is, risk of harm or harm itself, that's really what is being tackled here. And the risk of harm, or the probability of harm, is even if it's theoretical, should be considered very early on in the study proposal, in the research proposal. uh, because we know that, I mean, history tells us that when there is risk of harm, even at the planning stage, harm will probably ensue uh, when the research is implemented. Because we know that knowledge production, in fact, involves harm. And history tells us that. Okay. So harm in research. Uh, what are the known harms? Let's name them so that you will not forget them. What are the known harms in research? And I have what color coded the studies that I have mentioned before, in order to elucidate the harms that can happen in research. So there can be physical harm, pain, discomfort, illness, injury, death, disability, side effects, or withholding treatment. And we have seen this in the Tuskegee study and the Nazi studies. Psychological harm, anxiety, fright, embarrassment, shame, guilt, self-doubt, feeling betrayed. And we have seen this in all the studies, no? In the Tuskegee, in the Nazi experiment, in the Milgram study, in tea room trade, in the Havasupai studies, and in Wakefield's study, psychological harm. Economic harm, loss of job, uncovered expenses, lost time. Almost all studies, no, almost all participants, when they participate in the study, because of the time that they spare in order to participate in the study, they can lose their job, they can lose uncovered expenses, or they can lose time just because they will be participate. They participated in the study. Or social harm, loss of privacy, breach of confidentiality, damaged standing in the community or the family. You've seen this in tea room trade, in Havasupai, and in the Wakefield experiment, in the Wakefield case study. Or it's very easy to imagine that there can be legal harm that can also happen in some studies, no, wherein disclosure of illegal behavior can can happen. So it's there's you can always imagine a study where in the course of answering a question, some illegal behaviors are brought to the open. This is legal harm. To the point, there is harm in research, and these are the kinds of harm that can happen in research. And probably there are even other combinations of these harms. But there are lesser yet very important forms of harm that we often do not think about, but which are harmful just the same and which could hurt people just the same. See, for example, bothering participants or taking participants' spare time, or which could have been spent on personal concerns, or causing boredom to the participants. See, 30 minutes of your time, and then within the 30 minutes, you have no internet connection. You cannot tinker with your cell phone. You cannot play games. You are bored because you participate in a 30-minute survey, which could have been spent in other personal concerns. I mean, if you are the researcher and you invite somebody to participate in a 30-minute study just to answer questions, you are responsible for the 30 minutes. The participants could have spent that 30 minutes in other things for which you will not be responsible. But for as long as they are in your study, they are participating in your study, they are giving 30 minutes of their full time, full participation in order to participate in your study, and therefore you are responsible for them. Whatever happens during that 30 minutes, you as a researcher are responsible. If they become bored, it's on you. Um, Sometimes um, boredom is very disturbing to people, causing participants to worry or anticipate something uncertain. If in the course of the study, um, you are able to mention some question, or you're able to ask questions which make the participants realize that they have something in them, or they have done something, or something will happen to them, and they will be worried about it. They will they will have something uncertain in their minds. That is also harm to the participants, causing unpleasant surprise or any unpleasant feeling. Like I said, if this happened outside of the study, then it's not on you as the researcher. But if this happens within the duration of engagement of the participants, then it's on you when this happens to participants during your research. Making participants remember what they would rather want to forget. And this is very common because many questions that we ask, especially social research questions, no? Many questions that we ask um, would make the participants recall certain activities, certain experiences in their lives that they would probably rather want to forget. But you want them to surface. That's why you're asking these questions. You want them to surface and thereby cause harm on them. They relive their their experience. They relive the things that they dreaded, and that's because you asked a question, and you want to answer that question because you want to submit your thesis, and you want to defend them well, and you want to graduate uh, not knowing you were harming people. Or scientific misconduct. We've seen this in Wakefield. Scientific misconduct, manipulating research data, or giving the wrong information, or even giving the wrong interpretation, um, can harm the public and can make science lose its credibility as a discipline that drives development. Um, and harm can occur in any of the activities in research. So what do we do when we do research? We ask questions, we obtain the answers to the questions, and we generate knowledge. But specifically, we do these things. First, we frame questions. These are the things that we do uh, in research class. For any semester, we frame questions, and our advisor would look at the questions. We recruit participants, we gather data, we observe uh, phenomena, we interview, we administer intervention. Sometimes we manipulate the environment in order to see the results of our intervention. And then we manage the main effects of the manipulation, or even the side effects of the manipulation. And then we gather data, we store them, we share them, we analyze this data, we interpret findings, we write reports, and then we publish. That's what we do when we do research, no? So it's not just merely asking questions or obtaining answers and generating knowledge. These are the specific things involved in research. And in every part of in every activity um, in research, harm can occur. We have seen this in framing questions. We've seen this in the Nazi experiments. Who in their right minds would ask whether um, twins can be sewed in order to produce conjoined twins? See, it's just started from framing a question. Who in their right minds would ask whether the eyes would turn into another color when you inject dye? And it's just a matter of framing question at this point, of framing the question at this point. See, in recruiting participants, see, in the Nazi, in the Tuskegee study, in the Milgram, in the tea room trade, there was deception of the participants. There was or some participants, or many of the participants, were not even told why they were in the study. When you gather data, so again, these are the researchers that did harm to participants when they gather data, or when you observe, or when you interview in the tea room trade. Imagine the deception that the researcher had to do in order to observe a phenomenon, in order to interview participants. When you administer interventions, when you manipulate the environment, again, these are in many studies that we have mentioned, or even when you store data or when you share data. You've seen this in the Habasupai experiment, in the Habasupai study, that even at that point where you are already storing or sharing the data, there can be harm to participants. And even when you analyze, interpret findings, or write the report or publish, and we've seen this in the Wakefield case series. Harm can occur in any of the activities in research. That's my point. Okay, and so all I'm trying to say is research is asking questions, obtaining answers to those questions, and generating knowledge. But generating knowledge is an activity. It is a series of activities. Seen that in the previous slides. Generating knowledge involves many activities, and these activities can produce harm, but also these act or activity or series of activities demonstrates a performance of behavior. So you, as a researcher, you perform research, you do research, you demonstrate a performance in behavior, you demonstrate a manner in doing research, you demonstrate a manner in asking questions and answering them. And as with any other activity, as with any other act, there are right ways and wrong ways in conducting the act. There are right ways and wrong ways in conducting research activities. Okay? So remember that right ways, right behaviors, wrong ways, wrong behaviors, or wrong manner in asking questions, in answering questions, in generating knowledge. So because doing research is a behavior, and research is an activity, we would now look at another discipline in order to tell us what activities, what series of activities would make the whole research wrong or right. Okay, so here comes ethics. Ethics is the moral principle that a person's behavior, remember, behavior, or the conducting of an activity. So swak, no? Because research is a behavior, because research is a series of activities, um, there is an ethics in doing research. Ethics also involves systematizing, defending, and recommending concepts of right and wrong behavior. And therefore, um, there is such a thing as research ethics. I mean, just introduce it to you. The act of asking a question is of asking a question, of answering the question, of generating knowledge is morally laden. That's the point. So far, we will have a break after this, no? So far, what we have done was research is good because it can lead to development. It can improve our lives. But generating research activities or generating knowledge. And we need a systematic way of telling right ways from wrong ways of doing research. And enter ethics um, because it provides us with the ways to look at the activities in research and provides us with the standards um, for doing the right ways and the wrong ways um, in the activities of research. Okay, so uh, before we go to part two, can we have a break first? The part two will be a little longer. So, moderator, can we have a 5-minute break?
Yes po, Doc. Sure, why not? So,
Okay, thank you.
5-minute break po, Doc, now?
Yep. So we'll be back in what 10, 12. 10:07. We'll be back in 10:12.
Sige po. So, participants, and especially to our FB and YouTube viewers, we are having a health break for 5 minutes and be back after 5 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, welcome once again. Bilis ng 5 minutes. So we proceed with the second half of the lecture, no? And this time we'll be talking about the principles, especially ethical principles. And then we look at some guidelines, and we'll talk a little about research ethics committees. I'd like to check whether I'm coming clear and whether my slides are okay.
Yes po, Doc.
Okay, thank you. Okay, yeah. So in the previous section, we said that ethics is a ethics help us. Ethics helps us in telling right from wrong, and um, in ethics, these are when we talk about ethics, we talk about moral principles that govern a person's behavior or the conducting of an activity. So take note of the word principle here. Ethical principles, when used in research, ethical principles are the most convenient way to talk about the right ways and the wrong ways of doing research, because they are supposedly they are very basic and relatable. No? They come from religious creeds or wise aphorisms or philosophy or even theology or the law, or in the many disciplines that we are coming from, no? Psychology, sociology, um, or even professional codes and common sense. The principles can come from there, no? And they become the basis of most codes because they are easy to understand. If you break down something into principles, then it is portable. It's transferable to other situations. No? And for this particular um, lecture, we'll be talking about four principles: the principles of beneficence, non-maleficence, respect or autonomy, and the principle of justice. So the principle of beneficence. By definition, it's doing good for the benefit of others. No? So it's working towards a desired outcome, development, working towards development, and therefore doing something good in order to facilitate development, to prevent or remove harm, and to improve the situation. These are the doing good in order to prevent harm or making things better. And this is usually directed to the participants, the research participants in the community. So there will be direct benefits. They will receive tokens. They will have they will have a free health examination. They will probably receive reimbursements for the expenses that they go through. Indirect benefits. Sometimes the benefits are intentional, sometimes unintentional. There can also be actual or potential benefits: physical, psychological, social, economic, spiritual. Sometimes just by being there, research can be good in itself. Many would say, I'm happy to participate in this research because I was able to express my own feelings. I was able to contribute, and it makes me feel good to contribute to knowledge. That's principle of beneficence. And you do research because of those benefits that the participants enjoy. The main idea is research involves harm or at least the risk of it to participants. To outweigh the harm, the participants should benefit by joining the research. If there is no direct benefit to the participants, and this occurs in many instances, no, sometimes you even put that in the, most of the time you even put that in the informed consent. You will have no direct benefit in participating for this research. You will only have the benefit of what, an assurance that you can probably contribute to the to future knowledge. Okay? If there is no direct benefit to the participants, the community should at least benefit from the research. So um, enough na sometimes it can be enough na the participant has no benefit, but the community, the larger community in the future will probably benefit from the contribution of the participants now. And how do we maximize the benefits in research? We look at the motive. We maximize the motive. The research should have a social value. So this is where you are asked for the significance of the study. What is the social value of doing this research? When you ask that question, so your for the students, the teachers would say, when you ask that question, that research question, and you will have an answer to it, what social value will it bring to the community? In other words, what is what why would that research, why would the answer to that research question be significant to the community? And so you even have the templates for this, no? For the students, for the participants, for the community, for the administration. These are the benefits of the research. The results should be potentially useful. At the very least, it should be potentially useful. Even if they may not actually be useful in the end, you cannot anticipate that if unless you finish the research. Even if in the end they will not be very useful, at least they should be potentially useful. The potential use should be explicit in the significance of the study. That's why you are required this particular portion in the proposal. And the research should be technically sound. See, the technical specifications of the research, the methodologies, the way that the questions are asked should be sound. Because if you ask something that is not sound, it will produce answers that are not sound either. And therefore, it will not be potentially useful. And therefore, it will not be of benefit to the participants. So we say bad science or bad techniques in doing research is equal to bad ethics. That's the very reason why ethics committees would require first that the technical committee should approve the technical soundness of the research before they even talk about ethics. More on that later. The participants should become better by joining the study. So at the very least, if they don't have direct benefits, at least they will have information about the outcome. So if the participants join because you are doing a study on, you are measuring their anxiety and their anxiety and possibility risk of depression, kunyari lang, during the pandemic, at the very least, they should be informed about the outcome of the study. That's a benefit already that they can get from the research. Am I at risk of being anxious? Am I at risk of being clinically anxious? Am I at risk of of depression, um, those things should be taken care of right away. Um, Access to the best proven interventions. So, for example, if you put the participants in two kinds of interventions, um, one one could be better than the other. In the end, they should have knowledge about which one is better, and they should have access to the better intervention. This is so what's a good example? Kunyari lang teaching. Teaching method A and teaching method B, and you want to um, get across a a particular content. Um, if teaching method A proves to be better than teaching method B, all those who got teaching method B during the study should also receive the content um, by teaching method A because it was proven to be better than teaching method B. Something like that. They should have access to the best proven interventions. um, Reimbursements and tokens. These are the benefits that participants can actually have. Community conditions should improve. So these are anchored in goals. If you anchor your research in goals and research agenda of the discipline, or in the in FREB we have the NURA, National Unified Health Research Agenda, and the RURA, Regional Unified Health Research Agenda. The DOST continually um, publishes the research agenda for the next 5 years. No, and so um, if you want to anchor the research on any discipline, any particular agenda in the NURA or the RURA, that would be an act of an, that would be consistent with the principle of beneficence. Um, the direct or indirect benefits should be there also. So, for instance, in health, it should result in sustained healthcare or improved local structures or in capacity building. So even in researches wherein there is no direct there is no direct benefit to the community, but the ones who help you in doing the research may know later on how to deal with something. So, for instance, the ones who help you distribute the questionnaires on risk for depression or anxiety may know later on how to assess risk for depression and anxiety because you have done capacity building to the assistants in your research. That in itself is already a good benefit that participants or research staff can have when participating in research. Then there is also the related concept, the related principle of non-maleficence. In med school and probably in many health-related disciplines, we're always told this during the beginning of the course. No, primum non nocere. First, do no harm. So whether it's in health, in probably in criminology, probably in psychology. When we deal with people, first do no harm. First, do not do anything that is harmful to others when you approach people. So do not harm, do not put participants at risk of harm, and risk must be minimized. And or if there are risks, we already know that there are risks of harm in research. No? If there are risks, they should be reasonable. If there is a risk of pain when you draw blood from the participant, then it should be reasonable. It should count. It should be for the greater good. Okay, we're doing this because we want to know whether you have diabetes or not. Okay, we're engaging you for 30 minutes to answer a questionnaire. Um, so even if you are bored for 30 minutes, even if you think that this will be useless, there is probably a greater um, cause that we want to serve, which is to know whether you are at risk of anxiety or depression, something like that. Okay, so it must be the risk must be minimized and must be reasonable. And it is independent of consent. Ang harm is independent of consent. If even if participants say na okay, sige, you can do whatever you like. Even if it hurts me, you can do whatever you like. If it is harmful to the participant, you do not say na you said yes anyway. You misugot bitaw ka, pumayag ka naman eh. So therefore I can do this to you. No, it's independent of consent. Harm is harm. The risk of harm is risk of harm. So you do not do it. You do not pursue it, even if somebody gives you consent, especially if there are no mechanisms to minimize it, or especially if it's not reasonable. It is usually directed to participants, community, and the researchers, because the researchers can also be harmed. Okay, so the main idea is participants are needed in research. You need participants in research. You want to graduate. You want to present your thesis. In order to present your thesis, you need to do the research. In order to do the research, you need participants to participate in your research. In and of itself, research already involves harm. You know that, or at least the risk of harm. So you do not add to the risk of harm that is already present. Okay, participants cannot be worse off by joining the research. They should be better off, or at least they should nothing significant should happen to them at the very least. Um, so, but it's not forgivable if they are worse off by joining the research. So let's go back to the example. Na you want to know whether participants are at risk of anxiety or depression. They cannot be more anxious or more depressed than they already are when they participate in the research. See. Okay, so how do we minimize harm? First, there should be sound scientific protocol. Again, bad science equals bad ethics. No, so there should be an exhaustive background of the harms involved. So in the review of related literature, you do not only review the literature for the topic, you should also review the literature for the interventions, the methodologies that are involved in doing the research. And it should be exhaustive enough as to know what harms are involved when you do the methodologies that you plan to do. And there should be minimum participants, but adequate to arrive at a useful conclusion. Very important. And I remember one of the chairs of the regional ethics monitoring board saying uh, we're so happy, we're always happy, we have always been so happy to recruit as many participants as possible, um, because data wise they provide us with a large number of data. So the more the merrier, we say, diba? But the more participants that you involve, the more people that you harm when you engage them in research. So it's not correct. It's not, even if it's technically sound that you have more precise estimates when you involve more participants in research, even if that is technically sound, it may not be ethically sound. So sometimes um, the statisticians might say, okay, you only need 100, but you can go as far as 1,000. That's okay. It will even make the study more precise. It will even make the calculations more precise. But if you recruit 1,000, 1,000 will probably be harmed. But if you recruit 100, only 100 will probably be harmed. The principle is you minimize the harm that is being done, or you minimize the number of persons that could be harmed, but should be adequate in order to arrive at a useful conclusion. You need 100, pero you only take 50 because you want to minimize. In the end, you do not arrive at a useful conclusion. So mali din. It's technically wrong to um, to make shortcuts in the sample size. So minimum but adequate to arrive at useful conclusion. And there should be safeguards or corrections and compensations for complications and adverse events or injuries and any harmful events that can happen uh, while you engage the participants in research. Remember, it may or may not be related to the interventions that you give. But whatever happens to the participants during the time that you engage them in research, it is on you. It is your responsibility. So it's your responsibility as researchers to put safeguards, to put corrections and compensations for complications. You should allow for participant withdrawal at any point in the research. Again, the principle that no one should be harmed, and therefore, if participants feel that they are at risk of harm at any point in the research, even if they have already consented to participate in research, they should be allowed to withdraw. And then there should be appropriate qualified research team, because if you don't put a qualified or appropriate research team and something happens to the participants, they may not be qualified to deal with the complications or the adverse events that might happen. See, you do a study on kunyari lang anxiety and depression, or you interview participants who used to be anxious or depressed, and something ensues in the interview that makes them more anxious or even more depressed. If the research team is not qualified to deal with anxiety or depression, then the research will result in more harm to the participants rather than benefit. And peer review, ethics review, and community participation to account for the things that you may not be able to see during the planning stage of the research. And conflicts of interest should be managed. Okay. Principle of respect. So our national ethical guidelines, we have a Philippine national ethical guidelines. I will talk about it later. Um, says the principle in as regards to the principle of respect, it is a recognition of the personal dignity and autonomy of individuals. Autonomy of individuals, meaning their freedom or their right to determine for themselves what is right for them, um, and the recognition of their personal dignity. And the National Ethical Guidelines also points out that there should be special protection for those with diminished autonomy, or we call this formally the vulnerable population, um, those whose autonomy um, may not be those who do not have that much autonomy in determining for themselves what's good for them or not. Very clear-cut example are children. Children may not be able to decide right away for them, especially younger children. Think about uh, 7 years old, 10 years old. They may not be able to discern for themselves right away what is good for them or not. That's why we say they are minors. They need somebody who is of legal age to represent them in determining whether they want to participate in research or not. Of course, they can give their assent, and you do not ask them to participate. You do not insist that they participate if they do not give their assent. But somebody, an adult, a legally of legal age should be able to determine whether they can participate in the study or not. Should be able to give consent to for them to participate in the study or not. Um, if they are vulnerable, they should be given special protection um, in their decision to participate or not. That is showing respect. Okay. It is usually directed to the participants and the community. It is the recognition of a participant who wants, so we give respect to participants because we recognize that they are volunteers to join the research, and um, they can and should decide what is best for and can be done to them. They should, only them should be able to decide what is best for and can be done to them. Only them and or their legal representative. Okay, join a research. No one is obligated to help you in your thesis. No one is obligated to help you graduate. No one is obligated to participate in your research. No person, whatever his or her condition might be, can be required or compelled, obliged, coerced to participate in your research, whatever question you ask, whatever um, innocent question you ask. No one is no one is required to help you. So voluntary participation of somebody who wants who eventually joins your research is a gesture that deserves respect because they help you, they have decided to help you, then their gesture deserves respect and beneficence and non-maleficence and justice for that matter. You ought to respect them. You ought to respect the participants because they went out of their way, they risk to be bored, they risk to be harmed because you asked a question in your thesis, because you want to graduate. Okay. So application and research activity. Um, practice all the other principles. So if you practice beneficence, non-maleficence, and justice, then you you also practice respect for participants. Respect the rights of participants to decide, to withdraw anytime, to choose, to ask questions, to be different, to do safe, to their rights to safety, to health, to privacy, to confidentiality, their right to be informed, to be protected by the researcher. You should respect that, and you should tell that to the participant that you have these rights, and I respect them, and I will do everything in order to in order to protect your rights. Consult the community, and that's also a sign of respect. Consult the community before and during implementation of the study, because it is a gesture of respect for the values of the community. Treat the participants in a respectful manner, be gender sensitive, culture sensitive, and honor their choices and decisions. And protect the vulnerable, those with diminished autonomy or capability to protect their own interests. Sometimes vulnerability is a whole discussion altogether. But sometimes people, even if they are in the right legal age, even if they are fully capable of doing things, um, there might be situations in which their decision to make to participate in the study will be diminished. Um, Sometimes, so think of poverty. You are you you are a researcher. You offer 1,000 pesos token for somebody who barely makes 100 pesos a day for a live. That makes them vulnerable to decide because ayaw sana nila to go through the research, but you offer a certain amount that makes them vulnerable to um, alter their decision to participate or not in the study. Okay. Um, and obtain a free and informed consent. We'll talk about that later. Okay. Okay. So when we say, is the research worth pursuing? We always say the benefits should outweigh the risk of harm to participants uh, or to the society or to the researchers and all stakeholders. So we look at the benefits and the risks of harm, and then we weigh them. Um, then that's when we decide whether the research is worth pursuing or not. Okay. Um, okay. So a little about free and informed consent, because in research, you as students, as researchers, are required to describe this in the research protocol or in the research proposal, and you're even required to draft an informed consent form, a sample informed consent form, or a sample informed consent, a script. No? Okay, so it is a permission given by a person to another to act him or her. So it's a permission given by a potential participant to the researcher for the researcher to act on the participant. It is a means for the participant to practice self-determination and for the researcher to show appreciation of the participant's contribution. We tackle that. But it is not a self-administered document. Okay? It is not just a document that is self-administered. Na sinabi, okay, basahin nyo na lang po, and then tell me when you're done so that we can begin the study. No, it's not like that. It is something that is administered to the participant. The information is something that is administered to the participant, and you engage the participant in a conversation for the potential participant to make a decision whether to participate in your study or not, and therefore for them to give consent or not. It is not the only basis that makes research ethically acceptable. Like I said, even if the participant says, okay, you can do whatever you have, I am at your disposal because I'm participating in this research, that doesn't mean that you can do harm to them. That doesn't mean that you should not do things to minimize the harm. Okay? And it is not a one size fits all process. It is tailored depending on the participant, depending on the community, depending on the culture, depending on the situation. Okay. So the components, very important. The components of free and informed consent. The decision maker should be competent and should be legally competent as well. Therefore, you cannot allow just the 12-year-old, the grade 5 or grade 6 pupil to decide for themselves because they are not legally competent to make a decision to participate in a study or not. The competence of the decision maker is a very important component of the participant of the informed consent. And there should be freedom and voluntariness. It's also a very important component. So that means that proceeding from free will, the decision should proceed from free will and should be produced by an act of choice rather than an act of being coerced. Of course, the informed consent should have the information on the research. So it should be complete, correct, and relevant, and all that a reasonable person needs or wants in order to make a decision. What are the objectives of the research? How long will you engage the participant? Where will it be done? How will it be done? What will happen to the data? What will happen to the storage of the data? What are you going to do to protect the data from to maintain the confidentiality? What are you going to do after analyzing the data? Things like that. And then there is also that part of an expression of permission. So the informed consent should also have that part. Wherein the participant says, "Okay, I have read all the information. Somebody talked to me about the information. I have been given adequate time to ask any question, to clarify any questions. And after all those information, I am making a decision to participate in this study." That should be explicit in the informed consent. Okay. It is necessary before the start of the research. You do not get the informed consent after the research has started. Well, you can reconsent. You can informed consent can actually be revised during the conduct of the research, but the research cannot start without the initial consent of the participants. Okay, it is mandatory for any action that can be done on a person. So, or any action that can be done on the data of the person. Okay, so it's not just a consent for a face-to-face interaction with that person. If you're going to deal with data of that person, personal data, you should also get the informed consent of the person. It's a continuous process. For as long as research activities take place, the free and informed consent should be obtained or re-obtained, as the case may be. So it starts from participant recruitment to publication of the research, up to the publication of the research report. Okay. Principle of justice. it is the principle of being fair to research participants. Okay. Giving to or not depriving others of their due. And it's not, it means not exploiting the vulnerable. And it also means not excluding without good reason those who may benefit from participation in the research. And usually directed to participants, community, and researcher. The main idea is research has benefits and burdens or the risk of harm. And benefits and burdens should be distributed fairly. Okay? Those who will benefit from the research um, may also participate from may also participate in the research, and they can share the harm actually of of participation, because later on they're going to benefit from the research. Okay. Participants who are harmed should be compensated. If you are harmed financial, if a participant can be harmed financially by, you know, paying pang taxi or pang jeep, then they should be reimbursed. If participants are harmed financially by spending half a day in order to participate in your research, and therefore cannot go to work, then they should be compensated for the opportunity cost uh, that that they have incurred. Okay, so how to practice justice in research? You practice all the other principles. Again, I'm saying they are all interconnected. When you practice beneficence, non-maleficence, and respect, then you also practice justice in research. You reduce the inequalities, or at least do not increase the inequalities in research. And you should have equal standards for developing and developed countries, or developing and developed places. So equal standards for kunyari lang um, different communities. Okay? You should have fair recruitment, sampling, and assignments, and it should include those who may benefit from the results of the study. Just compensation for harm done, and the benefits should be shared equally. Should be so, for instance, availability and affordability of successful products. If a product is found to be effective or successful in your intervention, then they should be shared to the participants later on, or the participants should be given access, reasonable access later on, because they participated in, because they would have participated in producing the knowledge um, that made you conclude that they are effective. It is but fair. Okay. And also this angle, everyone deserves the truth. Okay. So there should be timely and truthful reporting of the results of the study. So usually in publication, this is taken care of by peer review of the publication. There should be no data fabrication or falsification. So fabrication means there's no data, but you fabricate the data. Falsification means there is data, but you change it or you omit it. There should be no statistical misuse, no plagiarism or use of others' ideas, words, or processes without giving appropriate credit, no unfounded claims or interpretations, no report redundancy or trivial studies, because everyone deserves the truth, just the truth as we all universally accept it. Okay, and one last thing about principle of justice. I usually include this in my lectures because usually this is relevant in colleges, universities, in the academies, no? And but not only in the academies, but also in training disciplines, no? So researchers deserve recognition. It is but fair. It is but just that researchers or the ones who work in research deserve recognition. So here I have the committee on publication ethics of the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors. Um, their definition of authorship or who are authors. This is an example of rules on who can become author. And in this case, this is the one adopted by, this is the one practiced by the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors, no? Or ICMJE. So ICMJE says authors should have all four of the following. All four of the following. So number one, they should have substantial contributions to the conception or the design of the work or the acquisition, analysis, or interpretation of the data for the work. So any of these, any of these can count as one, either contribution to the conception or contribution to the design of the work or acquisition and analysis of the data or interpretation of the data count as one. But it should have all the other three. The author should also participate in drafting of the work or revising it critically for important intellectual content. And then the author should also participate in the final approval of the version to be published. Plus, the author should sign an agreement to be accountable for all aspects of the work in ensuring that questions related to accuracy or integrity of any part of the work are appropriately investigated and resolved. So all those designated as authors, all those who end up in the authors list, in the kunyari, publication authors list, should meet all four of the criteria for authorship. Sometimes there are people who are not in the authors list, but they also meet all the four criteria. They should be identified as authors as well. Sometimes you forget. Sometimes the authors would forget na, ay, si person A pala also had substantial contribution to the interpretation of the data for the work, and then also helped in the final drafting, in the drafting of the initial draft and in the final draft, and would also be willing to be accountable for all aspects of the work. Even if they are not in the original list of authors, they should be identified as authors as well. But all those who do not meet all four criteria, kunyari lang, 3 lang of the 4 criteria, or 2 lang, or even 1 lang of the 4 criteria, but they helped in the study somehow, they should be acknowledged. So their name should appear in the acknowledgement portion of the publication. That's what the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors are saying in terms of authorship. And this tells us that those who work in the research deserve recognition for producing that knowledge. Okay, so the point is principle of beneficence, non-maleficence, respect, and justice. The point is participants do not need to be in a research, and their voluntary participation deserves beneficence or doing good, non-maleficence, not doing harm, respect, and justice. This very much sums up the why we are touching the principles, all those 4 principles. um, their voluntary participation deserves all these things: beneficence, non-maleficence, respect, and justice. Okay. So now we're back to the original question. What does it mean uh, doing research ethically? We asked this early on, kanina. What does it mean an ethical doing an ethical research? So we also said this. Now, research involves framing questions, recruiting participants, gathering data, so on and so forth. Even storing or sharing data, analyzing data, or publishing the data. Doing research ethically means doing all these things, doing all these activities in ways that benefit participants of society. That's the principle of beneficence. In ways that do not allow harm to happen or minimize or remove harm. Doing all these things in ways that respect the rights of participants, honor the choices and decisions of the participants, and protect those with diminished autonomy. And doing all these things um, in order to be fair to everyone concerned and to provide or not deprive others of their due. Okay. So that's the main point. I think that's the main answer to our question of what does it mean doing research ethically. Okay. So my next few slides will just talk about very briefly about ethical guidelines and um, research ethics committee. So just bear with me. I just want to make a quick connection between the theoretical principles and the ones that we are actually practicing in research right now, especially the the research ethics committees that we are monitoring right now in the regional ethics monitoring board. Okay, so those principles, the principles that we talked about, are coded in order to are code as guidelines in order to serve as parang guides for everyone who's doing research, everyone who is reviewing research to refer to um, in order to determine what are the right ways and the wrong ways of doing research. So we call them ethical guidelines. And this is a little arbitrary. I started from 1900s, but even before the 1900s, we all know that there are already, you know, moral principles in the in religious texts, in the Quran, in the Bible, in or in many, in the Hippocratic Oath, in many disciplines, there are already ethical principles that become the basis for the research ethics guidelines. But I started from 1900s because I think this is the farthest that I could get to a document that specifically pertains to research ethics, or yeah, research ethics. So in 1900s, we have the instructions for the directors of clinics, especially health research ethics, directors for of clinics, outpatient clinics, and other medical facilities. This is in Germany. They already have that, and this document already lays down the principles that we have said what to do in order to deal with patients who are involved in research. And even before the Nazis, before the Nazi experiment, there was already the German guidelines on human experimentation. remember the Nazi experiment started 1940, but 1931 there was already German guidelines on human experimentation. So the doctors who did the experiments on participants in the Nazi experiment already probably already know these guidelines on human experimentation. However, when the Nazi experiment ended in 1945, 2 years after that, the doctors who did the experiments were tried in court, and it was done in Nuremberg, Germany, and that's why the the minutes of those trials, the minutes of those trials were properly recorded, and those minutes we get the principles and that are turned into code um, for doing research among humans, and we call it the Nuremberg Code. And almost always, Research Ethics 101 would point this as parang the parent code of research ethics guidelines. So Nuremberg Code stemmed out of the trials of those who did the Nazi experiments in 1947. So after that, the Declaration of Helsinki, the World Medical Association came up with the Declaration of Helsinki simply because this was done in Helsinki Medical Association, and made the Declaration of Helsinki, which is again a list of ethical guidelines on doing research among humans. It's so from 1964, it has been amended many times from 1975, and the latest was to 2013. So we still have the latest version of the Declaration of Helsinki containing ethical guidelines on doing research among humans. The latest is in 2013. Then in 1985, the Philippine Health, no, that was even before. Yeah, we already have the Philippine Health. Now the Philippine, it was not yet called the Philippine Health Research Ethics Board, but we have national ethical guidelines starting 1985. I think it was still under DOST, Department of Science and Technology. FREB came later, early 2000s, no? But we already have the National Ethical Guidelines since 1985. And this has been amended in 1996, 2000, 2006, 2011. And then lately, we have the National Ethical Guidelines on Health and Health-Related Research. It already contains health-related research. And the latest version is April 2022. So that was just last month, and the final will be published, I think now. It was launched last March. The final version will come out any time. And 2017, we also have the CIOMS, Council for International Organizations of the Medical Sciences guidelines. And again, this was amended in 2002 and 2016. And for those who are doing clinical trials, remember clinical trials, the one, so COVID, kunyari, vaccine clinical trials or a COVID treatment clinical trials, non-COVID clinical trials, they're covered by the International Conference on Harmonization of Good Clinical Practice guideline. which was started in 1998, but with amendments, addenda in 2018, and I think they're coming up with something newer in 2022, or even 2021. I think it has come out already. So point here is there are ethical guidelines, national, international, local ethical guidelines that can be used by students, researchers, ethics committees in order to determine, as reference, in order to determine the right ways and the wrong ways of doing research. Okay. And who will implement, who will definitively say whether it is the right way or the wrong way of doing research. So here comes ethics committees. No, ethics committees are duly designated bodies that review and approve research protocols and monitor the conduct of research among humans. So research ethics committees, I believe Jose Maria College has had one or two research ethics committees already. I believe so. Um, the research ethics committees do not only review and approve research protocols, they also monitor the conduct of the research, especially those that are done among humans. And many of the researches that you are doing are done among humans. Um, so I believe you will benefit from the presence of the research ethics committee. Um, RECs are an essential component of a human protection in research. We should recognize that. In the Declaration of Helsinki, um, it says the research protocol or the proposal must be submitted for consideration, guidance, and approval of the concerned research ethics committee before the study begins. And then the committee must take into consideration the laws and regulations of the country or countries in which the research is to be performed, as well as applicable international norms and standards. And the committee must have the right to monitor ongoing researches. At the end of the study, the researchers must submit a final report to the committee containing a summary of the study's findings and conclusions. So the 3 points of engagement with the research ethics committee before the study, and you should seek approval while the study is ongoing, and that is the monitoring phase, and when the final report is submitted. Okay, so this is the scheme of the research review process. No, if you look at the bottom part, it says initial review, post-approval review, and final report review. That coincides with the three points of engagement in the research ethics committee: before, ongoing, and final report. Okay, so you start from initial submission, and then there will be an initial review. If there are modifications, then this goes back to the proponents of the research or the principal investigators, and then resubmitted to the committee, and the resubmission is reviewed again. If there is a final decision, then that's the time that you can that researchers can start. If there is a final decision and that final decision is approval, then that's the time that the research can start. If it is disapproval, then of course the research may not start. Okay, but in between the final decision and the final report, the research ethics committee can also be doing these things. They can look at amendments of the protocol. Remember, protocols must only be implemented the way that they were approved. If there are amendments of the protocols or proposal, kunyari lang, nag-change ng sample size, or nag-change ng location, nag-change ng population, nag-change ng intervention, these are called amendments. They should be reviewed again by the Research Ethics Committee, and you should not implement them before the approval of the Ethics Committee. If the Ethics Committee says, no, do not change sample size, no, do not change objective, then you cannot implement this in your study. Okay, progress reports, so-called deviation reports. Deviations are reported. Deviation, um, um, things that happen that deviate from the originally approved protocols should be reported to the ethics committee, and the ethics committee should review this and should act on this. If the committee says this poses greater danger to the participants and therefore you should stop your study, then you should stop your study. Early termination. The other things, SAE, these are serious adverse events, serious unexpected adverse reactions, and reportable negative events should also be reported to the ethics committee. Sometimes the committee can also do site visits. And then, like I said, the final report should also be reviewed by the committee to assess whether everything that has been approved were duly implemented, or whether there were things that were not approved but implemented, and in order to make corrections and suggest corrections. Okay, so this is the last part. At the bottom line for the bottom, why are we sitting 1.5 hours for you to hear me lecture on this? This is the bottom line. Research is good, but it involves risk of harm. Knowledge generation involves a series of activities that can be right or wrong. We need ethical principles to tell research activity, to tell the right activities from wrong activities in research. The participants do not need to be in a research. Their voluntary participation deserves beneficence, non-maleficence, respect, and justice. Beneficence means doing good. Non-maleficence means minimizing or not doing harm. Respect means recognizing the dignity of others and obtaining free and informed consent. Justice means being fair and giving others their due. There are international, national, and local guidelines that follow widely accepted ethical principles that can be used to design research methods and assess the ethical soundness of researches. An ethics review committee, an ethics review and monitoring by research ethics committees allow proper weighing of risks of harm and benefits of a research, and thorough assessment of the ethical soundness of the research. I think this is my last slide. Yeah, this is just a list of references. So yeah, thank you for your attention, and if you have any questions, I will be happy to answer them.
Thank you so much, Doc Alvin. We do have a lot of learning for this morning, and it really opened our minds on how to properly conduct research with proper ethics, especially what kind of research, who will be our participants, and if ever our study can cause harm to them, how we should interpret our data, and a lot more to consider in making our researches. So thank you so much, participants. It is now time to ask some questions or point of clarifications to our speaker. You can raise your hand with using the raise hand icon below, or type in our chat box kung ayaw niyo mag-speak.
Ma'am Queenie,
Yes,
I'd like 1 minute to just go to the bathroom.
Okay, sure.
But you can entertain questions
Yes
already.
po,
I'll
Doc.
be back in a minute. Okay.
Okay, no worries po, Doc.
Okay.
Okay, so any questions or clarifications? Pwede po mag-type sa chat box natin. And I'd like to ask assistance na lang din po with our ICTO baka sa ating Facebook Live and YouTube Live. Meron po silang questions doon. I cannot open kasi they both na apps sa Facebook at sa YouTube. Baka po meron silang questions doon. So viewers in our YouTube and Facebook Live, you can also ask your questions. We will try to check your questions, especially baka meron during the explanation or the presentation of our data. Meron po kayong questions doon. Dito sa Zoom natin, do not hesitate to ask questions po. Pwede niyo pong i-direct sa akin if you don't want everyone to see your question. I will read it for you. We waiting for questions or parang klaro yata lahat? Para lahat ng information na binigay sa atin this morning. So this is very true po, no? Na we really need our ethics to really thorough check our study before po tayo makapag-conduct. Sabi nga po ni Doc Alvin kanina na in research planning and reviews prior to the conduct of research, the risk of harm is assessed. Na-assess na yun po. No questions in our...
Yeah. No questions?
Yes po. Parang klaro yata sa kanila lahat po, Doc.
Yeah.
Kasi pati sa Facebook Live and YouTube Live po natin, wala din po silang questions doon.
All right. Yeah. No problem.
Pero baka dito sa Zoom natin, wala na po ba? Meron po palang nag-ask,
Okay.
Doc, if you are giving a copy of your PowerPoint presentation.
I'll email a PDF version of the slides to Ma'am Jo. To Ma'am Jo Ortega. Yeah, later. Yes, I can do that.
Okay. Parang yun lang yata yung hinihingi nila, Doc.
Sure. No problem.
Wala na po ba mga questions? Okay, so if none,
sure.
If none, then we are going to present your e-certificate.
Should stop there, no? Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much. Okay, so I'll be waiting for the ICTO to share the screen, the certificate of Dr. Alvin. Okay, so let me read to you the citation first. Jose Maria College Foundation Incorporated, Philippine-Japan Friendship Highway, sa Davao City. Certificate of Appreciation is given to Dr. Alvin S. Concha, Chair of Regional Ethics Monitoring Board of Region 11, for his invaluable insights, experiences, and expertise shared with the participants of the webinar entitled Basic Ethics and Research in this two-day Students Research Congress with the theme Phenomenal Milestone, Forecasting Prospects and Innovations Through Research and Development, held at Jose Maria College Foundation Incorporated on May 2 and 4, 2022 via Zoom, given the second day of May 2022 at Jose Maria College Foundation Incorporated, Davao City, Philippines. Signed, Ma'am Marichel Joy Yuhinilo, our Health Research Director, Sir Ronnie D. Mendoza, our Social Sciences Research Director, and Dr. Josefina D. Ortega, President for Research Development Quality Assurance. Thank you so much, Doc, for your time and effort.
Thank you very much. And thanks for having me. I'll be happy to do this again in JMC. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doc, for your time and effort. And to our
and
yes,
I wish you well in the rest of the activities of the Student Research Congress. So goodbye, and it has been a great pleasure to be with you this morning.
Thank you so much, Doc.
Bye.
Bye po. Anyways, participants, meron po akong announcement before we will have our lunch break. Later, we will have 2 breakout rooms. We have breakout room 1 for the MRAD format. We have the CCJE, BS Psych, BSSW, CASES, PE, and COM. Breakout room 2 for the other format. We have Psych, CEE, and COBE. Mechanics will be given by the moderators. For breakout room 1, we have Dr. Glenn Puno. And for the breakout room 2, we have Engineer Nika Bolaño. Okay, participants, here is the sequence of the oral presentation for this afternoon. Breakout room 1, we have CCJE, the efficacy of police patrol methods in crime-prone areas during the nighttime in the area of responsibility of Bunawan Police Station. Another entry from the CCJE, the effectiveness of police-community relation in crime prevention in San Francisco, Agusan del Sur. From the case psychology, social esteem and social acknowledgement as predictors of nomophobia mobile phone dependence among psychology students during the COVID-19 pandemic. Another, from the case psychology, social media usage and self-esteem among the college students in a selected tertiary education institution. OBE, accounting students' learning satisfaction of professional subjects as basis for continuous improvement. And the last entry will be COBE BSA, Internet Advertising and Customer Response of 64 selected students to local businesses in Davao City. For breakout room 2, we have, first presenter we have from COBE, Academic Tutoring Services. Next, CEE, Domestic Waste Fly Ash Concrete Block. Then, from site, Computer-Aided Interpretation Tool for RIASEC and Personality Test with Machine Learning. And the last one to present from site, Hiraya. So I will put it in our chat box para po makita ng lahat. Hopefully I can paste it here. Okay, for the breakout room 1, ito po yung mga mag-present. Sequence ng presentation po para mamaya. Do not worry, the moderators will also remind you of the sequence of our presentation. Please be reminded also that we will be back at exactly 1 p.m., especially to those students who will join the oral presentation. And I do believe that others will have their class this afternoon. But if ever you don't have any class and you have a plan to join us in the oral presentation and cheer your representative for your department, you are also welcome to join our breakout rooms. pag walang klase po. Pero if ever you have your class, you have to attend your class this afternoon because we have our synchronous classes again. This morning. So let us have our lunch. One said, no man can be wise on an empty stomach. So happy lunch, everyone, and see you again at exactly 1 o'clock this afternoon. Thank you.